Good morning. Welcome to this week's IGTV. I'm talking about 7 tips to help your teens speak up, to use their voice, to ask for what they want instead of continuing to complain about everything all the time. If your teen is in a position where they're finding speaking up very difficult, very challenging, and you're finding you want to jump in and do it all for them, or sometimes you really you need to do that because it's necessary, then this is the IGTV for you. If you're following on Instagram, welcome, good morning, hit the follow. If you're on YouTube, hit subscribe. Thank you for being here. My name is Allie Payne. I'm a certified life coach, certified relationship systems coach. I've been working with parents of teens for the last 15 years to help them end the painful disconnection, emotional blow-ups, and stressful silences, to build healthy, lasting relationships on trust and respect. One of the biggest parts of this is communication. I mean, really, think about it. We can't have a relationship without communication. Communication is the oxygen of a relationship. So when your teen isn't speaking up or using their words, using their voice, it's very difficult for them to create what they want or feel empowered to create more of the experience that they want. Okay, so that is what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to give you 7 specific tips, tell you why it's not happening, what you need to understand about their brain, and specifically what you can do to support your teen to develop self-advocacy. Now, I want to first say self-advocacy is not something that you and I were likely raised with. It's not something that we were taught. It was more like, you don't speak unless you're spoken to, or you don't say anything that might ruffle feathers because you were responsible for other people's feelings. So self-advocacy is not something that you probably understood yourself and might still struggle with. And if that's you, welcome. That's okay. This isn't about blaming your parents or anything like that. We're going to work on moving forward and changing a legacy where teenagers feel equipped and empowered to speak up, speak their truth, to use their voice. Because there's never been a time in a world where that's more important, that our teens feel empowered and understand that words are some of the most impactful tools that they will ever have. And that the opposite of that, feeling trapped in their brains where they can't say what's true, builds hopelessness, powerlessness, isolation, depression, anxiety, and a whole lot of other really challenging circumstances, trauma even, that aren't necessary. That was certainly my experience as a teen. Okay, so I want to jump in. So there's a couple things I need to say to set the ground here, set the tone, so that this is something that you can get the most out of. The first thing I need you to understand is the adolescent brain. For many of you, if you've heard my talks before, if you've watched, you've heard this part, so you're probably like, here we go. But it is really important for me to say, to understand, for those of you who don't know, the adolescent brain is going through the second and final growth phase of our lifetime. I do not just mean development. I mean growing. It is growing. If you have not watched Disney's Inside Out movie, I strongly recommend that you do. It is not just a cartoon. It is an actual animation of what goes on in the brain. It's called pruning, which is the destroying of really good neuropathways, simple neuropathways, and the creation of far more complex neuropathways. So for every one that is destroyed, there's approximately 10 that are built. And in that time, the brain is actually growing, but even better, it doesn't do it in any linear fashion. Nope, because that would be helpful. There is different rates of increased blood flow to random parts of the brain over a couple year period. This happens anywhere between 13 and 15, but the majority of this growth phase lasts approximately 2 years. The really, really roller coastery hard part. If you're the parent, you get what I'm saying. And so it's really important that you understand that. And I'll lead to a couple more points of that. I'm just looking at my notes here as I go through this, okay? So they're going through a brain growth phase. One of the biggest parts of that is they are developing, their brain develops the capacity for far more complex emotions, feelings, experiences, and thoughts. So as a child, they had a kind of a simplistic brain, simple thoughts, feelings, relatively, and from the adolescent brain necessary to be a successful adult, it becomes a very complex computing system. Now, here's what I want you to hear. Their brain develops the capacity for this complexity of emotions, thoughts, feelings, okay? They have the capacity. That does not mean their intellectual brain, the prefrontal cortex and the prefrontal lobes, don't fully develop until they're about 25. So I'm talking about two things. I'm talking about the hardware. The hardware is growing. The hardware is there. The software to access all of that hardware takes longer. The software is not fully developed until they're 25. So this is why self-advocacy becomes so critical and difficult for them in this time, okay? All right. So when your teenager comes home, let's say from school, it is normal because of this brain development growth for your teenager to be angry, frustrated, really complainy, angsty, constantly talking about what they don't want, what they don't like. Can I get a heck yeah? Teenagers are complainy, frustrated, angry, angsty creatures. And a lot of that is because of the dissonance that's going on in their brain. Their brain is removing really good stuff to develop what will need to be better stuff, hardware-wise, but software isn't yet developed. And so there's this dissonance in their brains, and it's uncomfortable. And also no one tells them it's happening, so that's super disempowering for them. They don't know why they feel this way, and that's frustrating. They liked who they were. I'm just going to say that just in case you were wondering. They liked who they were as a child. They knew who they were as a child. And now that their brain is changing, they don't know who they are. They don't know why they feel so like twisted inside. A lot of teenagers tell me they feel like they're broken or they're going crazy and they're terrified. And that fear comes out as defensiveness and anger, et cetera, okay? So this is all a part of self-advocacy and why you're not seeing a lot of it, because there's this misunderstanding that the teen brain in its growth and development also is just gonna magically wake up one morning and know how to self-advocate. No, that doesn't happen. It develops the capacity for it, but the skill is where you come in. That's mentorship. The skill of self-advocacy is a skill. Like, think about that. Were you ever taught the skill of self-advocacy? I wasn't. Because again, we were raised in a generation where we were not supposed to speak up for ourselves. We were not supposed to say what we needed. We were not supposed to disagree. We were not supposed to have boundaries. We were supposed to do as we were told and only speak when we were spoken to, and only do it in a way that was pleasing to other people. That's not self-advocacy. I didn't learn self-advocacy until I spent 10 years, and yes, that's right, 10 years in personal development. I either took, assisted, or was learning to offer programs every single month, one per month for 10 years. That's thousands of hours I put into personal development, and a great deal of that was communication. That was where I learned self-advocacy. I was already married and had children. Yeah, so if that sounds like you, we're in the right place. Okay, I needed to say all of that so that the rest of these 7 steps make sense, okay? So the first one is, your teen comes home from school, they're super complainy, they're always frustrated, blah, blah, blah. And if you were raised in an environment where uncomfortable emotions, challenging emotions were not okay, or you were taught you were responsible for other people's emotions, your parents, for instance, that you had to be a way that was pleasing to them all the time, which required you to deny or suppress or abandon what was actually happening for you. That's going to be hard when your teenager comes home and is all complainy and is all like frustrated and all over the place. It's going to be really hard for you, because your first reaction is likely to jump in and fix, because their frustration, emotional quagmire storm that is natural and normal for them in a lot of ways is going to trigger your fight or flight response, because that pattern is set up when you were a child. And if that's not okay or wasn't safe, you're going to want to fix. You're going to want to fix them. And that's the first place where this goes off the rails, because you actually, this is scientifically proven, their brain needs to have the practice of doing this, self-advocating. And it's just like a child when they're learning to walk. It takes them thousands of tries to get it right. And if you circumvent that by constantly sitting your child back down on their butt, saying, you can't do this. You are not good at, you need to sit down. They will not learn to walk, or they will learn to walk much later. It is exactly the same. You can delay the maturation of these parts of the brains if you constantly are circumventing it, okay? So step 1 is listen, don't fix. Listen, don't fix. You are not responsible for your teenager's feelings. I'm going to say that one more time. You are not responsible for your teenager's feelings. Thinking you are does not make you a more noble or better parent. That is codependent thinking that was programmed when you were a child. That's called codependence. Okay? You can be whole, complete, and okay, and make space for your teenager to be in their giant messy storm. And you can still be okay. You are safe. You are okay. Take a breath. You are not responsible for their circus. Okay? You can still love them and be present and listen without needing to fix. If you need to fix, that is an issue. I know it's out of absolute loving intention and wanting the best for your teenager. Of course you do. I would never question that, ever. I'm just saying that there's likely an undercurrent of codependence if you need to fix all the time, okay? It's not helpful for your teenager to learn to self-advocate. Step 1, listen, don't fix. Step 2, validate and empathize. Again, this is probably something that you were not shown when in previous generations. We didn't know how to do it. Empathizing and validating. If you don't know this, or this feels unfamiliar to you, the first thing I recommend is doing my 10-day listening challenge, because it's 10 days of practicing validating and empathizing, and it's free. If you're here on Instagram, you can tap on my name, then go to the link in my bio that says get the goods, and it's free 10-day listening challenge. Go do the free 10-day listening challenge. It's all about empathizing and validating. Here's a couple examples that I will give you is your teenager is in their emotional storm, which is mostly normal. You're listening, not fixing. Then you're going to validate and empathize. And what that looks like is witnessing and hearing their experience as they experienced it to be true, not as you believed it to be. That is a Dr. Brené Brown definition of empathy. I'm going to say that one more time. It is believing your teen's experience as it happened for them, not as you believe it would have been. Okay? So empathy means, first of all feelings are natural, normal, and human. All feelings, all of them, are natural, normal, and human. Okay? Even if that's not what you were taught, they're all natural, normal, and human. And they're not up for judgment. Your feelings are yours, and therefore they're right. What you do with them is a different thing. Okay? But your feelings are yours, and they're natural, normal, and they are right because they're yours. Same for your teenager. So that empathy is about saying, oh my gosh, yeah, that sounds rough. Oh, I'm sorry your day was, your day sucked. Or that sounds like it really sucked. You are making their feelings right because their feelings aren't up for judgment, right? We got that part. You're saying, look, I get it. Yeah, it's putting yourself in their shoes as they would have experienced it, not as you would have. So this means no judging feelings as negative, positive, good, bad, oversensitive, dramatic. That's very toxic. All feelings are natural, normal, and human. Okay? So to validate and empathize is saying, oh man, I'm sorry that was hard for you. Or, oh, that sounds really frustrating. Oh, I imagine that would have been really tough. Just little brief statements like that. That's empathy. Validating is saying things like, yeah, I would have been angry too. Or, yeah, I bet that was hurtful. Or, oh my goodness, you deserve to be treated with more respect. That wasn't very kind of them. So now you're actually making them right about how they feel. So validation and empathy are slightly different, but they sound kind of similar. Okay, they are not exactly the same. So you're going to validate and empathize. Why? Because in order to build self-advocacy, I need to come from a place of a calmer nervous system. When your teenager comes home from school, I'm just using this example, when they come home from school, or sometimes it's at the dinner table or whatever at night, and they're full of all this emotional mess, which is natural and normal, their nervous system is usually up here, okay? Their nervous system is usually quite hijacked. So when you listen without fixing, you build emotional safety. When you empathize and you validate, step 2, you help to calm that nervous system down so that they can be more present for themselves and they can move through this process more effectively, as opposed to getting stuck there when you and I perhaps had an emotional storm, an emotional mess, and we were constantly shut down and told not to feel that way, or that we didn't know how we were feeling, but your parent was going to tell you how you really felt. It's like a disjointed process that never gets any further. So you never learn how to effectively, which Dr. Brené Brown's recent research in Atlas of the Heart actually speaks to, is when our brains do not have the opportunity to effectively name, process emotions, we also cannot heal from or release them. So they get stuck in there. So that's why validation and empathy is so important, because it's calming the nervous system as we're aiming towards self-advocacy. All right, step 3. Once their nervous system has calmed, step 3 is to ask your teen, and now they don't always know this, so be patient and be compassionate, okay? You ask your teen, if you could say anything to them, what would you say? And when I say them, I mean anyone. When it was that teacher or that friend or your coach or that teammate or the customer service lady, I don't know, whatever. Ask them for an unedited version. Dr. Brené Brown calls this the shitty first draft, or the SFD. Okay, to ask your teen, and this is another way of calming the nervous system, to ask your teen once they're calmed and say, if you could say anything. Now, this is building emotional safety and trust because you're allowing your teen a limited moment to let her rip. I mean, let it rip. If you could say anything to that person or to that test, maybe it's an inanimate object, whatever, what would it be if you could say anything? And you just let them go. Let them have that moment. It's so healthy. It's like you going into your car and having a solid scream, cry, swearing blue fest over something. It's healthy. Proven. Proven it's healthy. Okay? So that's step 3. Now, your teen may say, well, I don't know. And that's okay. I don't know is a valid response for teenagers because remember, in the new complexity of their brain, it takes them, it's new. Did you get that? It's a new complexity. So they don't always know where to find the answer. And it's frustrating for them too. Sometimes they will say, I don't know because I don't know where the answer is. Sometimes they're saying, I don't know because they don't yet believe it's actually safe to say what they're really thinking. And that's okay. That takes time. You might say, if they say, I don't know, your teen, you might say, pause for 5 seconds, first of all. That's in the listening challenge if you haven't taken it. Pause for 5 seconds and then say, want to hear what I would say? And they might say no and respect that. If they say no, respect that. Okay? Just leave it at that. So step 3 is let them have that. What do you want to say? Like if you could say anything, what would it be? Let them have the blue streak. Okay. If they say, I don't know, that's okay. This is a process. You're building this capacity in their brains. Okay. Number 4. So this is moving through a process that is calming the nervous system and then building the software, okay, the intellectual response software to effectively deal with what's going on in their brain. So step 4 is determining the source of the frustration. Now, many adults don't know how to do this. So be patient. Be patient. Step 4 is what's the one thing that you actually want to be different or to change? What's the one thing? And it's kind of like the source of, if you go back to the beginning, all of that quagmire of mess of rah! What's the one thing that bugged you the most? That got you all worked up? That you would like to change or be different? Now, this is going to be harder for your teen's brain because that's a lot of intellectual processing that their unfortunately inefficient computing system is capable of. It's not because they're not smart. It's not because you're not intelligent. It's just because processing that kind of detail can be a lot for them when they've already been at school all day and they're like up to their eyeballs in their capacity of processing for the day. It's still a good question to ask, even if you get, I don't know. Even if you get, I don't know. You go, okay, that's cool. That's cool. If it comes to you, let me know. It's all good. Just love them in their silence. Love them in their inefficiency. That inefficient brain is so enormously frustrating for them. I wish I could explain how frustrating that is for them. Can you imagine if you woke up one morning and everything that you normally take for granted took you 10 times longer to figure out in your head? And it was like living in a permanent fog and you couldn't hormones are part of that. Lack of sleep is part of that. But this is what their everyday is. And it's really frustrating for them too. So just be patient. Once they understand what's the thing that got them pissed off in the first place, what's the one thing they want to change or be different, and they might take them a week to figure that out. It might take them months. They may never answer you. That is okay. By asking the question, simply by asking the question, you are helping their intellect, their prefrontal cortex and their frontal lobes to create a process toward self-advocacy. You can also model this. Like yesterday, I lost my ever-loving shit. Yesterday. In a way I have not in years. But I did it using all of my rules. I'm going to post a separate video on it. I used I language. I owned my feelings. I took hours, 2 hours before I said a word to determine what was the thing that triggered all of the, like, what was the beginning thing that got me so frustrated before I ever said a word. I was sat with it for 2 hours to say, okay, I'm so frustrated. What is it? What did I want that didn't happen? What did I want that didn't happen? Okay. So you got to get to that. So that's number 4. Then when they know, if they know, and this is not up for judgment, okay? Like how your teenager does this process is not up for judgment. When they were learning to walk and they didn't get it right, did you sit back and be like, well, you're going to have to lift that foot a little further. You're going to keep tripping on your toes. Like, you know, the toes at the end of your foot. Hello. And if you keep walking like with your like all off balance, it's not going to work. Like, what are you even thinking? You didn't do that when they were learning to walk. So don't be judging their process in learning to self-advocate when you were never taught either. So you can learn this with them. You can model this for them, that when you got frustrated, you can talk it out to them. This is what I was feeling. This is what I realized triggered me when I gave myself space to think of what was it that I was so frustrated about. And this was what I wanted to change. Then number 5 is the role play. This is really weird for teenagers. I'm gonna tell you that right now. When you're saying to them, step 5, okay, because now you've given them the opportunity to rip a blue streak, right? What would you really want to say, right? And then you're like, that helps calm. And then you're saying to them, well, what is the one thing that you would want to change? What was the thing that pissed you off that you wanted to be different? Now you can start to role play. Now I'm going to tell you, this definitely triggers teenagers' anxiety. It triggers all their anxiety. This is weird for them. So don't press it. Just say, look, how would you like to say that? How would you word that? Or if someone was asking you for that, how would you like them to say it? Sometimes if you turn it around and you kind of depersonalize it, so it's not them saying it, you say, okay, if someone was going to ask you for that change, how would you want them to say it to you? It helps them in a way to say, it puts them in a position of compassion and kindness, and it's not as personal. Role playing is weird because it's leaning into self-advocacy. And P.S., self-advocacy requires courage and vulnerability. And that is another reason why most adults don't do it. And instead, they're still back at complaining and ripping a blue streak about what they don't want and what they don't like, expecting someone else to take responsibility for their feelings and create the change that they have yet to learn to articulate. Like literally every day. I don't know if you're on Facebook, that's pretty much what happens. Right there. So role playing, you might say, well, let's write it out. Like, write it out. You don't have to show me what you want to say. Write it out. How can you ask for that specific change in a way? Now, this is where teens, again, come up against a wall because they've been taught that asking for what they want is disrespectful. blanket statement. Might be how you were raised, I'm just saying. Asking for what you want is disrespectful. I call BS, actually. It's not. You may have been raised in an environment where dissent or disagreement was not allowed, which required you to abandon, suppress, or deny your own feelings and what was true for you. I'm pretty sure you don't want that for your teen. So this is about teenagers say, well, I can't do that. I can't ask for what I want. Like, I can't do that. And what I need you to model for them is that, yes, you can. In fact, standing up and asking for what you want is the only way this world has ever changed. Maybe you lean into their favorite book character, movie, TV character. Okay, if so-and-so was in this situation, what would they say? Like, pick a superhero. If this had happened to the superhero and they were going to ask for what they needed, what would they say? Because we need to break off this BS lie that asking for what you need is disrespectful. That's a lie. You can ask disrespectfully by demanding or using a whole lot of colorful language. Sure, you can. You can ask really disrespectfully, for sure. And you can also be very respectful and impactful with your words. And there is few things that are more empowering in life than that. And if you haven't already figured out that this step 5 is called boundary setting, it's a part of that. Yeah, it's a part of that. So if you want your teen to ever learn that the power of speaking up and asking for what they want by setting boundaries, you're going to want to lean into this with your teen. So role play can look like a lot of ways. Depersonalize it, lean into a movie character. How would they like to be asked? Maybe write it out. And again, don't jump in and rescue your teen from developing this intellectual process. You could say, not right away, pause you could say, would you like some help with that? If they say no, then don't. Leave them. Trust that this is their process, okay? So role play is critical, where they practice what they want to say. Now, number 6, encourage them without expectation. And what this sounds like is, I get that this feels hard and scary. I believe in you. Can you imagine what it would have been like for you to hear that from your parents? That they stood with you in some hard communications that felt right for you. And they said, I believe you. I believe in you. And I will stand with you in this. I can't necessarily be with you. Okay, but that's what encouragement might look like. Encouragement might look like, would you like me to go with you? Okay, this isn't still about doing it for them. I hope you're at that. I hope you've heard this. This is not about doing it for them, but encourage them to say to them, it's okay that this feels hard. Because here's the other thing that gets in the way for teenagers. Adults in their life are insecure enough that when your teenager uses their respectful request for change, that the adults in their life will retaliate. I don't know, say teachers. And then this is not a bash against teachers, okay? I'm pro teachers. But there are human beings, adults in their life, who are immature enough that they will retaliate against your teen for speaking up. And we wonder why teens are afraid to use their voice. Wowza. So that's very real. It's a very real, unfortunate reality for teenagers these days to say it's okay to be afraid. I understand your fear of retaliation. That is real. I back you. I will support you. I will help you to do what it takes. And I will support you if there is any retaliation. I will call that person on it. So this is going to require you to put on some big panties too, okay? Because this is how we get conflict averse. So Encourage your teenager. You validate if their fear of speaking up. Validate it. You see, the problem might have happened in this moment in time, but this 7-step process takes time. The situation may not be there anymore, and they may never have spoken up against it, but this process is still required in their brain to learn. So when you encourage them, you're validating their belief of retaliation, their fears, and you're encouraging, saying, I get this is hard. I believe in you. This can be scary. It absolutely can. Maybe you share a story. I remember once I said something to my teacher and it felt really scary. And then I went in the bathroom and I threw up. Or I was shaking so hard and sweating, I almost dropped my water bottle because I was so afraid. And maybe you also share a story about where you used your words and you spoke up and did create change to show your teen that by speaking up, they won't burst into flames. Speaking up is the beginning of them, just the beginning of them beginning to create the experience and own their life that they want. Because no one else is responsible for doing it for them. They are. Okay? Step 7 is where I finally get to advocate. I haven't allowed you to rescue until now. No rescuing, no fixing. Step 7 is advocate. And there are a lot of caveats to this. There may be situations that require you to advocate for your teen, even though you've gone through these steps and they are overcome by anxiety or fear in doing so. So I'm going to go back for a second to number 5 because I forgot to say this. When you role play with your teen and then they, let's say, go to school or go into that situation, and then you see them after and you go, so did you do it? Did you do it? How did it go? And they're like, I chickened out. Pause. Do not say, but we practiced, but we went over all this. We talked about it. Oh my gosh, but we've been going over this for a month. You had it. You knew what to say. What? Please don't do that. Please don't do that. That just drives home for your teen. They don't have what it takes to do it, and you don't trust them, and you don't believe them or believe in them. Instead, say, it's okay. This stuff is hard. It's okay. I'm proud of you for getting this far. It's okay. Okay, so I want to say that about the role play. And number 6, encourage without expectation. Okay. Number 7, again, to advocate. There are situations where you're going to need to step in for your teen. But but at least can you try this process with them first? Because your job as a teen is to help them develop their brains long term for when you're not there. And when you jump in immediately, that is rescuing. That is not advocating. You are rescuing. When you are empowering and equipping your teen to find their voice, to begin to self-advocate, that is when, and they feel ill-equipped to do so, then you can step in and advocate as necessary. But advocating also does not mean rescuing them from natural consequences. So school, for instance. You can advocate for your teen for school. Let's say they have a major relationship issue with their math teacher or their history teacher, and they are, sorry, my nose is so itchy. They are terrified to go to that class because of the relationship with that teacher. Maybe they feel they're being bullied, whatever it is. You can advocate for them with the teacher or the principal, etc. Because that might be a situation that even though you role play, giving them words to say for themselves, they need you to come and stand with them in that. However, if they're not showing up to math or history class, you might also need to create an agreement with the school about a plan of how they're going to finish that class at the bare minimum, given that showing up is beyond their capacity of anxiety at this point, or maybe find a different teacher to do it with, or maybe they go to that class but they do it in study hall instead. You cannot rescue them from failing that class. That's rescuing. There are natural consequences. And that's not out of punishment or shame. It's about saying, I believe in you. I understand why this was so hard for you to show up. Let's deal with what we have right now, and we'll get through this. You can't rescue them from failing. They might still fail. Advocating is not rescuing. Advocating is standing in the gap for someone to speak what is true for them such that they feel safe and respected. It is not removing consequences that are not yours to remove. If your teenager still needs to meet a minimum requirement, you can help negotiate what that is with the school, find ways to do that for your teen, but they still have to do the work. And if that is not appropriate at that time right now because their current mental health status, then you negotiate a hiatus. Lots of parents do it. You negotiate a hiatus, you negotiate catching up, or you negotiate starting over. So that advocacy is different from rescuing, okay? Why is it is either allergy season? I don't know. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful for you. I'm going to recap the 7 steps. Helping your teenager speak up for themselves, to learn to self-advocate, is one of the greatest skills for their lifetime in resilience, confidence, and accountability, responsibility, emotional expression. It encompasses pretty much everything. Self-advocacy is so powerful. Step 1, listen, don't fix. Step 2, validate and empathize. Step 3, that's 3. Step 3, ask them what they really want to say, unedited version. Step 4, under that, what's the one thing that triggered their frustration that they really want to be different or change? What's the thing that set this off that didn't work for them? Okay, what's the one thing they want to change? Step 5, role play. Might not be done in person. That might be really weird for them. Okay, let them do it in writing, depersonalize, lots of tools. Step 6, encourage without expectation. They may never do this even though you get to step 6 and you can still say, I believe in you, I'm proud of you, it's okay, I know this is hard. Okay, encourage without expectation. Step 7, advocate. You may need to advocate, which does not mean rescuing. Thank you so much for being here. I hope this was helpful for you. I want you to also remember that the teens are naturally very insecure in their brain growth phase, and that insecurity, that their self-esteem drops almost 30%, that natural insecurity also gets in the way of their confidence to self-advocate. The problem is if we as parents are not going to help them develop the ability, the intellectual processing to self-advocate, that self-confidence or insecurity or nothing, they still need to learn the process. They still need to know how. And that often starts at home with you. They need to be able to speak up at home. Side note, because if it's unsafe for them to speak up at home and ask for what they want or say what isn't working for them, they're sure as shoot not going to do it outside the house. So is it safe for your teen to speak up at home? You can model these 7 steps. You can model these 7 steps by telling them when situations arose for you and how you followed these or a similar version. And you can encourage your teen to use these 7 steps at home with things in your relationship so they feel more confident and equipped to go do it outside their home. Because you will not be with them every stage of their life. You will not be with them in every situation. And self-advocacy is something I think that's wildly underrated. and we tend to shame and get mad at our teens for not self-advocating, yet we never actually teach them how to self-advocate. And again, the brain develops the capacity for all this more complex feelings and emotions, but it doesn't instantly wake up one day having this software installed, like, oop, overnight, update done. Nope, that's where you come in. They need you to help them develop the skill of self-advocacy. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, if you're here on Instagram, hit the follow. If you're on YouTube, hit subscribe. Leave me a comment. I would love to hear about your insights, your learning. And remember, I am here I'm on TikTok every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time talking about this topic and other parenting topics for teens and tweens. I'm here every Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific talking all about parenting, tweens and teens. And YouTube videos go up every week. I also have new articles and newsletters every single week on my website, alipayne.com, under the blog section. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your presence and your comments and your constant love and support. Bye, everybody. We'll see you next week.